You guys should be so excited about this book because I am seriously enthusiastic about it and thrilled to be here with Dean and JoAnn to talk about it.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Let's have you just give a little bit of biographical background and also your definition of innovation.
Yeah. JoAnn?
Sure. I'm JoAnn Garbin. I am the former Director of Innovation in Cloud Ops at Microsoft. My job was the data center of the future. So I was trying to design what it needs to be 5, 10, 15 years out. I'm now the founding partner of Regenerous Labs, which is an innovation lab. And for me, I come from an entrepreneurial background. That's one of the things we highlight in the book. Most of my career, I've been an entrepreneur. Most of Dean's, he's been an entrepreneur. And so for me, innovation is value creation. It's how I pay my bills. It's how I spend my days.
And yeah, I'm the entrepreneur, so next week I'll be 21 years at Microsoft. I never thought it would last that long, but I've had incredible career and opportunities. I've worked a lot in product teams, but about 7 years ago I joined AI research, and I currently work in the office of the chief scientist, working on AI research and innovation. My definition of, I'm gonna cheat a little bit because I'm gonna get a definition of innovation I learned from JoAnn, and I define it by what it's not, and it's not invention. People typically think that coming up with a new idea or a new way of doing things is the totality of innovation, but that's only the invention. Innovation is all the hard work that comes after to bring that idea into the world, nurture it, cultivate it, build an organization around it, and actually get to a point where you're delivering value. So I define it a little bit by what it's not.
So you wrote a whole book about innovation at Microsoft. Why does the world need this book?
Yeah. So it came out of the fact that I was 1 year in at Microsoft. Dean was 17 when I met him. And we were trading stories about our careers leading innovation, and they had a lot in common. And between finding those common threads between us and looking at the future and looking at the future of work in a world powered by AI, we just felt like there were core lessons that transcend time and technology and industry and role. It doesn't matter if you're in HR or in engineering or research. There are practices that everybody could benefit from. And we set out to first prove that our hypothesis was true, and then write them down and share them with as many people as possible.
And maybe just to add, I think that was the two things we found was that there were these patterns that were true and universal. We also discovered this incredible sort of joy and collegiality in the teams that were innovating. And so that was really our motivation, was to make people better innovators so they could be productive, but also so they could be happier.
Yeah, talk more about that connection between innovation and joy that you saw, which you in part realized by interviewing lots and lots of people across all different departments, divisions at Microsoft.
Yeah, it really taps into a fundamental human need. We are builders. Like, since the dawn of humanity, we've been creating things. And really, up until the computer age, we were still creators and builders. We've had this like 50-year span of not all of us get to build. Not all of us get to tap into that fundamental joy of being human. We feel like generative AI is changing that now, and we'll all get to participate more. But a lot of that, from our vantage point, it's just really hitting on those fundamental urges to create and collaborate with others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to add to that, a lot of business can be zero sum. We're trying to cut costs or we're trying to steal market share. The thing we noticed was that the groups that were innovating had this positive sum mentality. We're creating something new, something that benefits our customers, our employees, our partners. And so that joy was something we were impressed with and wanted to kind of document how it's generated and shared out.
Well, part of Microsoft's secret sauce is that it has embraced innovation. And what you discovered in part is that innovation is loopy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's definitely meant to be a double entendre. Innovation is loopy. You know, we get the rap of being crazy scientists, mad scientists, but there's a method to the madness, and it is very loopy. There's all sorts of patterns of in the innovation process itself that are iterative. You discover, you design, develop, you learn, you fail, you iterate. So innovation is loopy comes from that, but the thing behind that is that it's structured and it's standardized. There is method to the madness, and that is really important because if there isn't a method, you can't teach it to people and you can't bring in new people and get them into the process effectively. So you have to make it a structured, standard process.
And this is why, and it's so great whenever we talk to folks in the HR discipline, because they understand this, that loopy is the way innovation operates, but it's not the way the corporation or the startup or even the mid-sized company wants to operate. They want to be linear. They want to go predictably from point A to point B to point C. So the innovator is in this challenging spot where they can't guarantee when they'll arrive at their end state because of the loopiness and the setbacks and the fact that failure is part of the challenge. So the best innovators that we found had kind of understood that. And they understood I'm in an environment that wants predictability and linearity. It's my job to explain why things are going to be loopy and prepare the people I'm working with and anticipate when it might loop back, but then when it's going to loop again forward. And so fitting innovation into a corporate structure or any company structure is hard, and it requires a certain profile of person.
Right. You also wrote about innovation, like you said, as a structured phenomena that non-technical people could be a part of, because the perception generally is that the innovation happens in the lab, or on the computer with programming code or AI. And, I'm the admin, outside my executive's office trying to keep the trains running. But your book has many examples of innovation happening in the context of recruiting and onboarding. Dean, do you want to give us some examples?
Yeah, and if I could even set that up just slightly, we have a pattern in the book that is called Innovating Beyond Technology. And one of the things that we found was that the best innovators at Microsoft were thinking way beyond the technology. They would innovate their business model, their culture, their processes. And it's that holistic approach to innovation that really leads to breakthroughs. If you're just doing the tech or the business or one element, you'll make some progress, you'll make some incremental advances, but when you innovate in all these areas, you deliver what we call architectural innovation, and that's where the big breakthroughs come through. And then what we found was that every group we worked with was innovating recruiting, and they had found very creative ways of screening in innovative talent. And do we have time for a couple examples?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So one, Bing, which is our search engine, does a candidate-driven loop. They basically leave time in a recruiting loop for the candidate to reach out to people, connect, follow up, schedule a coffee. And they look at how they use that time and whether they're actually using it to learn and engage and build relationships. And it's a good indicator of whether or not they're going to be innovative when they hire in. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah. My favorites from the VS Code chapter. This is a small team that supplies, they're like 50 people now, and their product services hundreds of millions of developers. It's the world's most popular development platform. They recruit by having 2-day co-programming, pair programming sessions. So they figured out that if you want to know how to work with somebody, work with them.
2 days.
Yeah.
You can't fake it for 2 days.
You can't fake it.
Right.
Oh, and sorry, the third is just Xbox, because it's an amazing practice, is instead of thinking we're recruiting for culture fits, we're recruiting for culture adds. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. Every time you hire, you're changing your organization's DNA, and adding to it is way better than fitting into it.
Yeah, and was it Eric Horvitz,
Horvitz.
Yeah.
who said he said, "You are who you hire."
Full stop.
Full stop.
Yeah. So that is something that seems to run through the company, and I'm sure you folks have said you are who you hire. So I want to just briefly. This is another innovation with Xbox onboarding and how they introduce people to their culture through onboarding. You want to share that story?
You want to kick it off?
Yeah, so it's even a bit broader than that, is that they manage culture like they would manage a product, of which onboarding is a really critical part. So they have dedicated people whose job is to cultivate a healthy culture within the Xbox organization. And they hired them out of the product management discipline. And they say, culture is something we need to proactively shape and create. So they have reviews and metrics and targets. It's not as definable as a product, but they've really invested in a team that takes it very seriously and whose sole job is to think about where the culture is today and where we need to go with it.
And it's a theme we heard again and again. We just actually heard it at Microsoft's internal partner forum. Mustafa Solomon stood up and he said, when there's a paradigm shift, when your technology and business change, your culture has to change. You have to innovate culture when you innovate everything else. And so teams like this make it a very intentional and repeatable process.
That's amazing. Not that this is the way we've always done it. No.
Yeah.
The exact opposite.
Yeah. The book you're going to receive at the end of this talk is broken up into 2 parts: case studies, where we go inside these groups, Xbox, Bing, and others, and also patterns that you have identified that are patterns of innovation across an organization, whatever kind it is. And one of those is that innovation is everywhere. JoAnn, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it's innovating with everyone is that idea Dean talked a little bit about already, where it's not just tech, right? It is everything that you need upstream and downstream of the tech to bring it into the world, or the service model, or whatever the thing is that you're innovating at the core. It takes many, many people to bring it into the world and service it and maintain it and market it the right way and price it the right way and learn from the customers. And fun fact about that, just to support it, there's a lot of research about innovation, and 90% of the money invested in innovation goes into technology. That's true. But 90% of the value created comes from everything around the technology, the business model and the people systems. So the companies that figure out to innovate with everyone and bring all the roles, all the disciplines, all the parts of the business together, they're the ones that really achieve monumental success.
And there are types of people that are involved in creating, innovation throughout everywhere, upstream, downstream. And you coined the phrase boundary crossers. Tell us about that, Dean.
Do you want to tell us about the
JoAnn.
life cycle first, JoAnn?
Yeah, so going back to innovation is loopy, that one core loop is discover, design, develop. And you can think about it, right? Like it's real easy to think about, design, researchers discover things, designers design things, developers develop things. It's not necessarily that cut and dry. We found a nice taxonomy that better describes the aptitudes and the personal enthusiasm for different things. And so with that, you can look at discovery as really where pioneers live, right? Like they like blank sheets of paper. They don't they're not scared of a blank sheet of paper. And then you have in design, you have what we call settlers. These are the people that like to take these early things and put some roots down and figure out how it could actually live and work. And then you have your developers who, in that development phase, you have your town planners. These are the people that build the systems around it so that it's scalable and repeatable and all of that. So those can be people in HR, in engineering, in design. Like the discipline is different than the role. And then the trick is how to connect all these people together. And that's one of the things we uncovered.
So the fourth sort of work personality that we found was boundary crosser. And these are the people who don't do any one single thing, but are connective tissue across different groups, organizations, and disciplines. And that was the one that we found if there were not a good number of boundary crossers in a group, their ability to innovate. They might innovate internally, but they wouldn't build the bridges upstream and downstream to different parts of the company to actually land the innovation. And one thing we really like about this framework, every time we do this in front of a team, we'll do two things. We'll say, which personality are you? And hands immediately go up. Everyone knows which personality they are. And then we say, how well mapped is your personality to what you're doing today? And the response to that depends on whether the manager's in the room. But often we'll kind of get people who will come to us, afterwards, and they'll say, my God, I never realized, but I'm a pioneer and I'm in a town planning role. And I'm going to go and talk to my management and find a way to change that. So just that knowledge of the process, the vocabulary about the phases, and then that taxonomy of work personalities really helps a management team to think about where they're deploying people and getting people into the right nature of work.
And it just seems that taxonomy is so inclusive because, again, raise your hand. What are you? It's like, I know I'm a boundary crosser, but I know people who are pioneers and I know the town managers.
Exactly.
So it makes it really encouraging and open, that idea that innovation comes from everywhere.
Yes.
And it's that fit people with phase. And that's how you can make innovation inclusive of everyone, because I am very happy at the beginning. I am very unhappy at the end. So you don't want me there.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk about failure as a path toward innovation. Tell us about, Dean, the story of Microsoft getting Googled.
Yeah. How much time do we have? I'll keep it brief. Google today, of course, is a word to search for information. We have used it internally for missing the boat and missing a huge opportunity, which in the original case of Google was the search opportunity. And so we wrote a whole chapter on search in the book, and we really explored what happened. And there's a couple of ways of analyzing it, but the critical point is that Google innovated their business model in addition to their technology. A lot of people think their search algorithm was what really got them launched, but it was the business model where they could give all their software away for free, which attracted users, which attracted advertisers, which is how they made money. And that flywheel was fundamentally different from what we had always done at Microsoft, where you pay for software as you use it. We understood it, we responded to it, but it was too late because many of these business models have self-reinforcing loops that you just can't break. So to get Googled in the internal parlance means to be too slow in reacting to a new market or a new opportunity and letting someone get to that place where you just can't break back in. And then the fun fact here is missing search is what caused us to miss mobile. Because even though the iPhone was out there and took a certain amount of market share, the space that Microsoft would have normally won is what's now dominated by Android, because they could give the operating system to handphone manufacturers, not just for free, they would pay them to take it because they would give revenue share from advertising, and they could open source it because they didn't need to make revenue, so you could modify it. So that is getting Googled in a nutshell. And maybe can JoAnn talk a little bit? Yeah.
There is an upside, though.
Yes.
In innovation, if you're not learning, you're not trying hard enough, and which comes oftentimes from failing at something. And the failure of getting Googled taught us about this architectural innovation, this combination of tech and business model change. And so leadership looked around at the pieces and parts in Microsoft and they said, oh, well, we have Bing. And they invested, the Bing team went out and invested in becoming early adopters of a technology called deep learning. It was real early, like just a few academics and a few Microsofties, a few other people. And then they invested in a different way in a group called Cognitive Services, little group of boundary crossers. They sent them out into the company and said, let's bring AI as a service to life. And we may not be able to win the mobile war, but we can get the mobile developers using our AI services. Well, what that did was a new business model. So now we have new technology, new business model, and 14 years later, not quite, maybe 12, we have the generative AI revolution that Microsoft all of a sudden seems to be out ahead of. But it was really those decisions they made in the aftermath of getting Googled and looking around and going, well, how do we do what they just did? How do we do that to them?
Yeah.
And
We
look-
Google.
Yeah,
Look,
we
look
Googled
where
Google.
the company is today.
Yeah.
And again, from the outside, it just seems like, surprise, it happened, but it was over a decade in the making. Yeah. Innovation requires change.
Yeah.
And change, as I heard Sally Jewell, who used to be our head of the Department of Interior, I heard her at another talk today say progress moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
So tell us about the importance of building trust in building innovation, and then we'll get to this idea of rehire the team.
Yeah. So this is such an important concept. We put a whole chapter to it. Innovating with Everyone is a chapter about how to help people with behavior change, with moving from some current state to some future state. And there's deep psychology around this. There's great frameworks around this and tools on how to do it. It's a method. Again, method, not madness. And so we talk about, it was interesting to us, I'll shorthand it this way. When we started this book, we didn't think we were going to name names. We were like, let's not make this about the people. Let's make this about process and tools. And within like the first conversation, maybe the first minute, we're like, there's no way to not talk about people. It's all about the people and how to get them to move through this cycle and how to have them work together. And so I won't go into detail about it, but there are some practical applications and tools that we learned. And one of them is this great concept we learned from Phil Spencer called rehire the team.
Yeah, so Phil runs our originally Xbox and now all of our gaming assets. And we can all imagine how dramatically gaming has changed, in 20 years, from physical console and discs on game to subscription through the cloud. And so what Phil will do in all his leadership is what he calls rehiring the team. If there's a major technological shift or a major business model shift, they define what it's going to be and what it means for what the organization needs to deliver. And they map that down to every individual job description. And managers are then charged with going and having the conversation. How does the new requirements of the organization map to your interest, background, skills, and passions? Some people ultimately decide they'll go off to another part of Microsoft, but the vast majority see this as opportunity to learn and grow. And they become even more connected to the organization because they've been rehired. They haven't just been told, well, things are a little different, keep doing what you're doing. So we love the intentionality and the sort of engagement of rehiring the team.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, like I said, the books will be out in the lobby, and JoAnn and Dean are going to stay around and do a book signing with you. But I have a question. As entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, what are you doing with the proceeds of the book?
So everything is going to STEAM education charities. We felt pretty we felt it was really important to not only empower the people in the workforce today, but help create the next generation of innovators. So every book. Now you're getting free books.
But they were paid for.
They were paid for, but we encourage you to go to innovation@microsoft.com. There's bonus chapters, there's more articles and talks, and you can buy boxes of books to give to your friends.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time. And I look forward to seeing you in the lobby and meeting more of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.